How do academic staff become good teachers? Through continuing professional development, CPD. But what does CPD mean in reality to academics teaching in higher education? What is it they actually do to make sure that the way they teach really works? In this video, we hear from academic staff at Sheffield Hallam University about the way they approach and value CPD. We hear about how important it is as a formal activity and how appraisal provides an opportunity to reflect on practice and to agree development needs. But we also hear about how frequently the richest CPD opportunities are self-initiated and informal. We spoke to academics attending a university learning and teaching conference, a professional recognition workshop, and in moments between teaching. What is CPD?
CPD, to me, it's about sort of intellectual curiosity. So it's about staying interested in what I do. I think it's about developing knowledge and skill for practice, about maintaining professionalism, and striving to sort of get better, really.
Many of the academics we spoke to talked about informal opportunities and serendipity. Stella Jones-devitt, a National Teaching Fellow, talks about an example in which being in the right space helped to clarify her thinking.
The best one is actually quite an informal one, where I actually was going to London to see an exhibition of the Bauhaus imagery and paintings, and I was grappling with concepts of critical thinking, which is an area I'm interested in. And it suddenly occurred to me that in the Bauhaus was all this wonderful imagery about unlearning, and it was something that I'd been grappling with, about how do we break students into being a bit more confident. And actually it suddenly hit me like an anvil on the head that actually what we needed to do was to almost take a step back before we can move forward. So it was a very informal opportunity, but it actually really did make me think about what I was doing.
Many universities use peer-supported learning methods for staff. The academics we spoke with shared the view that learning with peers, either formally or informally, was important to them.
I think that professional practice only evolves in peer relationships with other colleagues, and I actually think that it needs to happen informally and organically, really. That you have to establish a means of trust. I think it needs to be subject specific often, not entirely. It's not that you can't learn things from other people's disciplines.
My current peer enhancement review and focus has been around a particular module that I teach at level 5, and I've been working with another colleague. We've been looking at sharing resources across developing student employability, but also about developing academic skills for the final year projects and dissertations. It's been really good because we've realised that we've got different skills and qualities, and I'm probably stronger in some areas on the lectures, and she's got a really nice manner and has encouraged me in my seminar practice. So we've done some swapping teaching materials, which has been got to be good.
Paddy Turner notes how playing with ideas through peer discussion is important to him.
Personally, the way I learn best anyway is in conversation and discussion, rather than through, going away with a book somewhere or reading privately. So discussions with my colleagues, or going to events and conferences where there's lots of discussion and ideas being thrown around, I find that absolutely central to my development individually, yes.
Jill Lebihan also reflects on the diverse ways in which she learns about her practice with peers.
Having peer support, having someone come in and teach with you, going into other people's classes, having conversations about how you're working currently with students in a corridor, having people come in your office and looking at your plans for what you're intending to do, working with a module team is fantastic.
With my peers, the people outside of the university, it's really valuable to work with them because in a big institution like this, finding other people who are doing exactly the same job as me and have exactly the same goals in the workplace. Have to go outside of the university because there aren't so many people working in exactly the same role as me. So it's really rewarding to work with them and just be among people who've got exactly the same objectives. So meeting the same challenges.
David Smith sees facilitating CPD sessions for his peers as a mutually beneficial opportunity.
An activity that I led myself, so what we wanted to do within that was discuss how active learning could be used within large group lecture theatres. And the idea behind it was we got a number of people together, we discussed their basic practices and their approaches to different sessions. The reason why it was a good CPD activity was because I got to take their ideas away. So I didn't go in with a preconceived idea about what the best practice or a good practice within that situation would be. I collated the ideas and opinions of about 15 people and then pulled out of those examples which I could integrate into my own practice. So it was by talking to my colleagues about a particular area of practice through something that I led enabled me then to basically steal their good ideas and use them.
While academics enjoy discussing their practice with colleagues informally, attending CPD seminars and hearing from inspirational speakers can also trigger innovative practice.
I was sitting in my office one day at lunchtime pondering about whether to go to a seminar and feeling really busy, and somebody knocked on my door and said, "Are you still coming to this session?" And it was by somebody called Boyd and McKernan, two people who were doing a Churchill Scholarship session on co-design. And I went along, decided that I would make the effort, and it revolutionised our thinking in the whole way of introducing a co-design methodology across a whole undergraduate programme. So I'm really, really pleased that I didn't waver and I went along. But it's interesting that it was almost happenstance that made me really value the activity, and I nearly didn't go.
I spend a lot of time thinking and reflecting, and you need space for that. And sometimes you don't always get that. So it's those lunchtime conversations that you have with colleagues when we're sat at our desks talking. But I try and do a very focused CPD approach by blocking out a week in my calendar, which is about going away and writing up some of the ideas and the things. And there's nothing like having a senior line manager breathing down my neck saying, "Have you got that paper in yet?" So that's good, and I bet I need that deadline sometimes.
Serendipity, or working smart, feature in the accounts of many academic staff. Liz Barrett is a senior lecturer in English literature.
It's very important to me that I work smart. I have lots of different things going on. And one thing I've learned is that the best way of fitting in CPD is not to see it as an extra bolt-on that comes at the end of the year after you've done all the essential tasks to do with teaching and learning, but rather to look across the whole nature of your work and your life and to recognise that those other activities are your CPD.
CPD, like any learning, connects to life-wide activities. Academics talk about how important it is for them to be an active learner.
The CPD that I think I get the most out of is being a student. It's hard work, it's a big commitment, and it's hard being bad at something. And I think that is why I get so much out of it, because I think that a lot of staff forget how difficult it is being a student. I think that they forget that people don't understand the discipline. I think that they are incredulous that people have no understanding of certain aspects or can't do things first time. And being a student and being put in that place and being reminded gives you a certain sense of humility about, no, it's not always easy. You won't always understand everything. You will encounter things that you are fundamentally very bad at. You will compare yourself to other students and you will find yourself lacking.
But I'm also trying to learn new things maybe that I'm not very good at, so that I remember what it's like being a student. So currently I'm learning violin and I'm very bad at it. And when I play badly after I've practiced really hard, my teacher is lovely and she's supportive and encouraging, and that reminds me that that's how I need to be as a teacher too.
The 2 dissertations I've done while a student at Sheffield Hallam University, the first was in teacher education, and it didn't go very well. And I learnt so much because it went so badly wrong. I then started teaching dissertation to undergraduates, and I was able to say, this is what I have learned by doing a dissertation that went well, and then a dissertation that went, well, a PhD that went very well, but was very hard work, and then something that didn't go very well at all. And so this is what I would recommend you do, and if it does start going wrong, these are the signs that it's starting to go wrong. This is where you can learn from my mistakes. I've just finished 2 years ago another master's dissertation. It went really quite well. And so now I can basically bring that to bear and say to the students, this is what your work should look like. This is how to reference. This is the format. This is how long these things take. These are techniques you can think of, and this is what time it will take you to learn those from scratch, because I've had to do that.
Taking time out, away from the university and the day-to-day pressures, is another CPD strategy some staff use.
CPD has impacted on my practice really through going to conferences in teaching and learning. And I went to a conference a few years ago where staff were showing how they get the students to make online blogs and wikis. I thought, well, that's interesting for my engineers, maybe I'll get them to do it. So now I get my engineers to actually make online wikis and blogs and produce their own technical websites.
I've just come back, for example, from a 3-day poetry event where I attended a number of different sessions which gave me ideas for things I can bring back and do with my own students. And every time I run a writing event in the community, I learn something from members of the public about my own teaching and learning practice.
One I went to recently was a workshop in Leeds. It was run by the union that was about how to write a bid for money, which was really, really useful. It was also interesting for me because I'm a writing tutor, so I work with students on writing, so it was quite refreshing to be on the other side of it. There were a packed room of people who all have to write bids for grants and money, so that was really valuable. We all had the same objective and we were working together to hone each other's piece of writing.
CPD is valued by staff, but given the pressures of academic life, it can be difficult to keep time aside and to plan it carefully for development.
I'm not strategic in the sense that I don't plan a long way ahead and think really carefully about, okay, you know, I'll be doing this next time, then I need to do this, and then I need to do this in order to kind of develop myself in a very strategic way. However, I suppose, select the CPD that I do engage in a strategic way, rather than just randomly doing something that seems to be useful, that might one day be useful.
The choice of CPD is, and personally, it is a very scattergun approach. I don't choose CPD per se. I don't go out with a strategic plan and going, I am going to learn about this. I go to conferences, go to LTA conferences, look at what people are doing, decide whether or not that is an interest, and then I follow it up. I don't go out with okay, this week I'm going to learn about flip lecturing and then go and learn about all of that. It's very much an ad hoc approach. As it becomes important, as things develop, it comes to the social media interactions, as things are brought up, I'll then go and follow those up.
More experienced staff can see how CPD changes throughout their career. Graham Holden is now Director of Teaching and Learning at Sheffield Hallam University.
It changes as you change through the different transitions in your career. So if I think back to the first thing I did, I was a postgraduate researcher, and so the types of activities I did then were much more knowledge-based, focused on my research and sharing my research. Now, as I've moved more into more senior roles, it's more about networking and working with peers. So I think it reflects where you are in that point in your career.
CPD never stops being important. Jill Lebihan notes how leadership development is important for her now.
I have to think about the impact that I have, not just on students, but on colleagues, and making a difference that way, because that's how I'm now appraised and judged. So just being one of the team isn't possible. You have to kind of internalise the idea of being a leader as well as being one of the team. So that's changed a lot about how I think. So a lot of my CPD activity is focused around myself as a leader rather than just as a teacher.
In the last 12 months, I've just been appointed to a senior job in the university, and so I have much more of a leadership role than I have had before. And the most powerful development I've ever done, and the one that I value the most, is coaching. And so for the last 12 months, I've had a coach helping me go through these next stages in my sort of moving into a more leadership role. And that's been incredibly powerful and useful, and is something that, of all the activities I do, I personally value the most, I get the most from.
So I do teaching and learning development work, and I try and mentor new staff as well. So I do quite a lot of work in sort of developing teaching practice, not only my own, but those of others as well.
Academic staff see appraisal as something that needs to be put in balance.
I think there's a tension between the organisational need, obviously, and the time for people to have their own development. The ideal is when the two come together. I have to say that I think we need to provide a balance between some things that might be maybe more innovative, like wandering off to an art gallery and actually making some sense of it. If things become too formulaic, we may miss those opportunities for innovation. Having said that, I still think that we need to think about the bigger picture and where we fit in with our practice within the wider organisational needs. So it's a bit of a balancing act.
Actually, appraisal can be... I'd like to say that it doesn't really matter, that my standards are the same, and I work hard and I'm driven to deliver just myself. That is a kind of internalised thing. But actually, I've had some really, really dispiriting appraisals. And one of the worst appraisals of my life was where I went into a line manager and talked about what I tried to do with my teaching and how I tried to improve my teaching. And he said to me, yeah, but we just take good teaching for granted. That's not really anything that we value. Now, that was some time ago, and I'd like to think that things have moved on, but it really, really knocked me for six.
I think at my annual appraisal, it's about objective setting, because I'm a senior member of staff, but I also sort of talk about my own personal development. And I'm always looking for conferences to attend, papers to write. So I set myself a target of writing at least one conference paper and one journal paper every year. And so we discuss that in my appraisal. And if I want to go to a conference, I usually present. And if I want to go for a conference that's going to develop my practice or those of others, I get the opportunity to attend.
I tend to find the appraisal process useful in terms of it forces you to sit down with a line manager. Forces both of you to sit down together, because usually you're very, very busy and you're just getting on with the normal job, and it's quite a good opportunity to sit down and reflect. In a way, I think that I find the process a little bit forced, because you're having to identify an aim, objective and tick boxes, and sometimes you don't necessarily get a chance to reflect fully on how well things have gone, as well as how badly things have gone. I think we need as an organisational culture a little bit more chance to celebrate how good we are, rather than constantly beating ourselves up about what we could have done better.
Appraisal seems to work as a space to reflect for many staff.
So I use the appraisal process as a way of pausing in the year and then evaluating what it is I need to do over the coming 12 months. So an early appraisement or early processes would be set around, okay, I need to learn about using Blackboard, very mechanically type things. Of late, it's become more of a point to stop and think that I need to disseminate my practice. First of all, it was at an institutional level, and now I've decided that, okay, I've done that, now I need to do it a little bit more at a broader level, so across different institutes. So I use the appraisal as a stop point and a point to decide what it is I need to focus on over the coming 12 months.
I think what the appraisal does is give me a space to reflect. And because the way I work CPD, around my other commitments and trying to build it into my life, my whole life. What I often need is a little bit of space to review all the activities, bring them together, look for the links, look for the connections, and write a framework around which gives a coherence to what I've been doing. And that's actually quite an empowering process, and it I think gives me more professional autonomy and control.
It's the key point in the year for me, so though I like it to not be at one point, I think it should be an ongoing conversation, and I like to phase appraisal over at least 2 conversations, so there's a reflection on how things went, did we achieve what we wanted to achieve, and a reflection on how I've done within that and whether I could have done things differently or better or so on. And then that's that looking forward in terms of both where the work's going but also where I might want to develop myself personally, and then that translates into a plan. So it's a key point in the year because it helps focus the mind on the conversation and then having that conversation with your manager. So it's a really key point in the year.
So I think appraisal needs to be a positive experience. I think people need to be encouraged and supported and shown enthusiasm for what they do. And I think that's particularly important relating to teaching, because I think often good teaching and our day-to-day interactions with students are really taken for granted, and we need to learn to value those much better as leaders.
Academic CPD works best when it is autonomous and informal, driven by the academic. For early career academics in particular, formal opportunities like PG certificates in academic practice provide them with the skills they need to become confident and flexible teachers. Our mid-career academics talk about the importance of creating space and turning to each other for support. CPD remains important for colleagues in leadership roles too. CPD, in one form or another, supported through appraisal, is part of every professional's life.